Teachers, what is the scariest thing you have seen a student do? I was teaching grade 4 and had announced my pregnancy to the class when I was about 4 months. Everyone was so excited. One little guy, however, made it his mission to try and hurt my baby. On several occasions, he kicked a soccer ball at my bump, would try and trip me, and one time even said, "Let's meet this baby," while opening and closing scissors. There were some other contributing factors, but I ended up taking leave early due to anxiety. So weird. When I returned the next year, he had moved to a different school. Next story. Not evil scary, just scary. My dad was the elementary school principal, and there was a little girl in one of the younger grades who would fall asleep during class and wouldn't wake up no matter what her teacher or my dad or the paramedics my dad called would do. She'd eventually wake up on her own after several hours. She did this randomly, scaring her teacher, my dad, and her parents a lot. Sadly, eventually she died in her sleep at home. Oh my god! OP gave no indication that was going to happen at the end. At all. What a way to blindside me, dude. Holy! We don't get to know any more than that, not what condition she had or what was going on, even how she died? Insane. Next story. This was a boy who was 4 or 5. I would help my mom, who was the actual teacher. This kid would constantly cry, all the time, no matter what we did. I would always sit with him and color, talk, or just anything to try and help him feel better. He would always make sad pictures of himself crying and a monster. He said no one believed the monster was bad. I told him, oh, we all have monsters sometimes, but we have to be brave because once we face the monster, sometimes they go away. I ended up telling his mom about this monster and she wasn't sure what it could be. Long story short, the monster ended up being his dad. He cried all the time because the dad was abusing him. I hate saying it in any other way. Every day he was home, but the mom actually walked in on it when she got off early from work one day. She tried to shoot the dad. He ended up in jail and she told me she put the kid in therapy. I've not seen him since, but that's stuck with me. I thought it was just a creepy thing he thought about. The monster, make-believe or something. But no. His monster was real. What does it say? That I knew exactly where this was going from the start? That I've read too many of these threads, perhaps? Maybe. But also that the world can just be a crappy, terrible place with some really awful people, I think. Next story. Had a kid who was likely psycho/sociopathic. Other staff often labeled him as super cute and had a great smile, but the kid was disturbingly good at getting large groups to follow him, and there was always something off and kind of fake about his happy tone of voice, like it was coming from someone 10 years older. From time to time, kids who I'd known to be a follower of his would do something wrong and completely out of character, but it was always difficult proving he was the actual cause of it. One day on the playground, I noticed he kept relocating his group out of earshot of staff. When the staff moved, the group moved somewhere else. I kept close enough to be noticeable to them, and eventually the kid came up to me and said something like, "Don't you think the younger kids need more attention right now?" And I said, "Nope, I think I'm right where I need to be." To which all emotion disappeared from his face. He looked me dead in the eye and coldly said, "No, I think you need to go somewhere else right now." Then gave a large smile and went back to friends. I referred to him as Manson to the other staff from that day forward. Next story. I've had several dangerously violent children over the course of my career, but it's been really bad in the past 3 years. Kids trying to steal my teacher's scissors so they could stab someone, flying desks and chairs, kicking and punching adults, self-harm, physically attacking younger students, vandalism, screaming and crying so loud no teaching can happen, growling when angry, running away. I had a student last year who would get upset and stand against a wall, banging his head until blood started to smear the wall. Yes, we tried to stop him, but it usually involved 3 to 4 adults restraining him. Kids can be really hard to restrain when they're thrashing around. It never surprises me to hear kids my students' ages being put in handcuffs. His mom said the wall banger was fine and didn't need any counseling. My principal encouraged me to work harder at building a relationship with him. The kid would usually be returned to class within 30 minutes of being dragged out with a bandage on his head and a bag of hot Cheetos. I teach kinder and first grade. Next story. He didn't really do anything that scary while he was with me, but he did bloody scare me after he was gone. I had just become the class teacher of 30 ninth graders in the middle of the school year and had to tell a student that he was expelled because he had only shown up to class 3 times in 6 months. We had a nice chat before that. I told him I felt like I was missing the bigger picture here as I was new to that class, but I still felt bad because he didn't seem to be the kind of guy who just skipped classes because he didn't feel like leaving his bed. He was very polite, thanked me for being gentle, shook my hand, turned around, and clocked another student, breaking his nose, ran out of the room and pepper sprayed the door area to cover his retreat. So, that was awkward. Days later, I finally had time to go through the administrative files of my new students. His file was full of drawings. He liked to draw in class when he still came. He drew mainly AK-47s. He was born in Russia, we were in Western Europe. Around the AK-47s, love poems to the AK-47 in Russian, and scenes of, well, AK-47s in action, and lists of fellow students. My predecessors had confiscated these drawings and his hit lists and put them away in a file that most people wouldn't even touch because it's mainly for documentation of things you already know when you're their teacher. Nobody had told me there might be a freaking problem waiting for me. Nobody had told the social worker of the school, probably because he didn't disrupt classes. Also, nobody told me that the other students and his pals had bullied him relentlessly for a year before he decided to stay away from school. I guess I wasn't told that because no teacher knew, as they hadn't freaking cared to figure out why he was spending recess alone, sitting by himself with a 1,000-yard stare. I learned that when the other students had warmed up to me and started telling me things like this. Next story. For me, it's not what I see. I've seen your typical high school garbage happen. Fights to the point of unconsciousness, students stating they're going to end XYZ student, lots of knives, no guns though, etc. It's what you hear from kids. So far, I've known of 5 assault issues, 2 from a family member, 5 or 6 pregnancy scares and they can't tell mom, 2 or 3 seriously wanting to take their own lives, no food in the house from more than I can remember. These are the things that mess with my mind at night. My classroom is under my control. What happens outside of it isn't. To play along, though, when a kid overdosed in class was a little alarming. Trying to wake up a teenager while also not trying to curse or hurt him, sternum rub, which could lead to a lawsuit, was not fun. I didn't actually sternum rub him, but I was close to doing it. I had called for the nurse, but they were already gone. The admin was taking their sweet time getting there. The other kids were cool about it, though. For anyone wondering, he made it out just fine, and from what I know, at least attempted college. Next story. Laughing maniacally and asking really inappropriate questions every time they saw videos or photos of tortured and dead Holocaust victims. Kid also laughed through most of Schindler's List. He collected Nazi memorabilia too and wanted to show the class. I vetoed that immediately. Next story. Oh, this one is easy. Sadly, too many to list all of them, but this one stands out. Probably somewhere in my 8th year of teaching, I had a student attempt to take their own life in the bathroom. Now, I always keep a first aid kit in my classroom at all times, complete with tourniquet because America, and I teach middle school, so when I heard some screaming from the bathroom, I automatically assumed a fight, until someone started screaming, "She's bleeding everywhere." I grabbed my kit and just rolled into the girls' bathroom to see blood everywhere, as one of the older students, 8th grade, had injured themselves with a knife. Start yelling to call 911 and apply pressure to the wound. The girl, who was semi-conscious, kept whispering in my ear to let her go, saying it was okay, while also haunting me and saying I don't want to die. Thankfully, emergency services came quickly and were able to get her to hospital. I just sat on the bathroom floor, on the pool of blood, and just started crying. Like, legit crying hard, something I've never felt or done before, like a deep wail. This, of course, freaked the kids out because you have to imagine that I'm not the smiliest or emotional teacher in school, and now the students started freaking out. Admin came in and just sat with me as I cried my heart out. Needless to say, I took 2 days off, which thankfully led to the weekend. I think it hit me so hard because I was also quite depressed in middle school and had similar thoughts. Of course, it also hurt because I had a daughter. It just hit me all at once and I was a wreck for weeks. Girl survived and last I heard has a family and is doing well. Her mother had just died to cancer, which led to the depressive episode. I've had many things happen over my years of teaching, but this was definitely top 3 scary. Next story. After 15 years in preschools, this last year was the most difficult. I often felt more like a bouncer than a teacher. My group of 16 students would normally be a breeze. You get a range of characters and maybe 1 or 2 high-need students, but This year, by the end, I realized we had about 6 to 7 high-need students, almost half the class. 4 of them prone to violence. If I could get one to stop, I could get the next to stop fighting. But by the time I got to the 3rd or 4th student, the first would run up and hit someone else. Blocks would go flying, and several times I had to dodge 1-meter sticks. My glasses had been broken once and spit on multiple times, and my shirts ripped all in attempts to stop them from hitting each other. Though the one act that disturbed me the most was around the time we had an outbreak of the rotavirus, hot projectile vomiting. We give the students the benefit of the doubt and privacy in the bathroom, as you do, but one particularly screechy student had started going and pouring the other kids' toothpastes in the bathtub. But every day or so, we wanted to show him that we believed in him, that we could trust him. As we were getting ready to go outside one day, 3 students started fighting over where to put some shoes. But I didn't see Jay or hear his usual yelling. I asked my co-teacher, and she told me he had asked to go get his water bottle from the class about 10 minutes prior. She chose to handle the battling students, and I went to the class bathroom. There was Jay grinning his demented grin and laughing next to the toilet, toothbrushes all on the floor, and one in his hand as he brought it to the toilet. I shouldn't have taken it from his hand, but I did, and the screeching started. We had to store the toothbrushes and toothpastes away from the students until Jay left. Next story. My mom is a teacher. She once told me about the student who spent the entire class furiously writing Bible verses all throughout their notebook. The student always wore black, long capes to school and said they identified as a werewolf. My mom had to call the student's parents one day because the student was writing threatening things in the notebook and drawing very scary pictures. Somewhere in that conversation, my mom learned that the student's dad identified as a ghost and the mom identified as a vampire, and they were angry at my mom for trying to stop the student from expelling their feelings in the notebook. They told my mom that she needs to be very careful because they, quote, know witches who would come after her from afar. Nothing happened to my mom, but it freaked her out for a very, very long time. I feel like I need to clear up some linguistic things here because I see this a lot, often used in like bad faith arguments and all that, which I don't know, this post might be a thinly veiled version of. But saying someone identifies as a ghost is just not a thing. Like, identity is for socially constructed and understood roles, I suppose. But a ghost is sort of just like a binary. You are a ghost or you are not a ghost. There is no social structure surrounding the concept of a ghost. I don't know. I feel like anything I say is going to piss people off, but using the term identify like this, in my opinion, is often just, bad faith arguments against certain social movements, beliefs, all that. Anyway, this whole story smells like garbage to me. I don't think this is real at all. But if it is, those Etsy witches really got to pick up their game. Nothing happened to your mom? Gosh, how much do you have to pay to get a good hex these days? Next story. Riot. Literally, it was a riot. Remember that year when people were calling in bomb threats to schools all over the country? The high school I taught at was one of them. So at least once a week we had to evacuate the building and go to the elementary school behind us, and we sat in the gym. Well, one of these times, 2 rival gangs in the school started a fight. One student revealed he had a taser, and all chaos broke out in that elementary school. We had to get the police officers from not only our own city, but 2 neighboring cities to come and get it under control. Our principal got a black eye, and the assistant got a concussion. Several police officers were beat up, too. I taught high school, so these were freshmen to seniors fighting. Next story. I teach adults how to use machines. I've seen some scary things, but it's shop-specific. Multiple people having a 5-pound steel grinding vise fly about half an inch from their face, people breaking 3/4-inch high-speed steel end mill and having half of it go flying across the shop, people leaving their vise handles on the part of the machine that spins and sending those flying. All of those have happened multiple times. Next story. I used to pick up my younger sister from her school. She was in year 3 back then. That day I came in a bit early and found the students creating chaos and screaming. There was no teacher there. My sister and other students were crying and running out of the classroom. I decided to look into the matter, and what I saw shocked me to the core. There was this little girl with a blade in her hand and pointing it at her other arm, threatening others that she would injure herself. Also, the fact she was laughing the whole time made it much scarier. It was an actual sharp blade, too. I escorted the students to leave the class and screamed for the teacher. Crazy day. Next story. Early 90s and middle school. I was a 6th grader and in our band class with one of my friends being this nicer guy named John. He was in 7th grade. However, there was another guy named Ben who was in this class who was also in 7th grade, and he was mean as hell. One day there was a mandatory 6th grade assembly, and the band director had to walk us across campus to the assembly. John confided to me that, "When you leave, I know Ben is going to hurt me." The pain in John's face was indescribable. I didn't know what to do. My mom was a cool teacher, but she smartened me up to being a teacher's kid and told me never to tell or report what other kids do as some tattletale. But this I felt was going to be extreme, and luckily she was hanging up a new art display in the hall, and I told her what John said to me. She said she understood and promised she would check up on that class. The whole half-hour assembly, I'm a nervous wreck and wonder if John is okay. Luckily, he was. According to my mom, she walked in just to check in on the class and found that Ben had John pressed up against the wall. Ben had a protractor/compass needle from math class out in his hand, and he had the needle in the ear canal of John. Luckily, Mom caught him before any physical damage occurred. John was incredibly rattled, and Ben caught a semester-long suspension from school. Years later, John worked in the music industry and even won a couple of Grammys. Ben, however, didn't turn out well at all. More suspensions and expulsions. He eventually became a drug dealer and one night tried robbing a fellow drug dealer while driving around. The dealer shot him in the chest and then set the car on fire, where he subsequently burned to death. He was only 18. Next story. I was watching 2 students from the younger preschool group, both around 2 to 3 years, playing a few days from Christmas. Boris puts a box on Tony's head, and they both laughed with the sound of Christmas music in the background. Tony put the box on Boris's head, and more laughter. This went on for about 2 minutes with them giggling and laughing, and then Boris took the tinsel and pulled the gold decoration down, revealing just a wire. He lunged at Tony, wrapping it around his neck, and started strangling him like an old-time mafia hit. Boris would eventually be expelled on account of his parents not trimming his nails. Oh, why was this important? He had mauled multiple students, leaving bloody cuts down their faces and mutilated and scarring. The mother, in tears, tried to explain without explaining. The father is just strict, and the school wasn't strict enough. Next story. I'm not a teacher, but my dad used to be a physics lecturer before he retired. I remember one day he came in from work semi-laughing and semi-bemused. He had a story he had to tell us all. Apparently, during a lab session, all the Bunsen burners were on. One student walked by a burner and ripped out an enormous fart that ignited. The flames jetted up right into his butthole, causing minor burns to his chocolate starfish. Dad was belly laughing at that one for weeks. Next story. When I was teaching special classes, a 9-year-old did a 180. I adored him in the beginning. I mean, he was so sweet. Suddenly, he started to pull his junk out to show everyone, wrote inappropriate things everywhere, tried to do weird things with other students and teachers, head between breasts, head on junk, squeeze everyone, swore at everyone, started throwing things around, and he said he'll find my house and end me. Now teaching kindergarten and had this one boy run and fall. Immediately blacked out and stopped breathing, went cold, only woke up a while after but struggled to speak and his eyes crossed. It scared everyone. The cleaning lady shouted, "He's dead!" in front of the other kids. He ended up okay with no issues at all. I'm going to assume that because OP didn't say it, they never really found out why the first kid did a 180, but if you've been listening to these stories for a while, I'm sure you have a guess or two. And all I'll say is I hope that kid's doing all right. Next story. It was show and tell time, a favorite of all the children. They all brought toys, including Melanie, who brought a baby with a crying function. As we all sat in the circle, toys behind our backs, Melanie's baby went off, and I asked her to please turn off the baby as we're starting. It stopped making noise, so we continued. One boy brought a cape. We talked and asked questions. Another girl brought something else. But Melanie's baby started crying over and over again. "Melanie, please, if you keep turning the baby on, you won't be able to share for show and tell." "But Mr. OP, she can't," another student chimed in. When I looked over, she was shaking the doll and punching it in the face. "No, Melanie, don't punch your baby in the face. That's not how we quiet them down." "Punch baby face," shouted another student in an angry deadpan. In the end, she did share her doll and we discussed how to properly help a crying baby. The other students did offer the punch baby face method, but we found better ways. And how all electronic toys need to have off switches for show and tell. I hope that toy had an off switch in general, not just for show and tell. Surely that wasn't just in a home crying every now and then just for fun, right? That sounds like hell. Next story. A first grader swallowed a dum-dum sucker whole and got it lodged in her throat. The teacher realized what was happening, despite the chaos of all the kids packing up to go home. The teacher performed the Heimlich and after about 10 seconds was able to get the sucker out of her throat. Also, one time, a young girl fell over in the classroom and sliced her forehead open on the corner of a bookshelf. Had to get several stitches. Next story. I had a student who became obsessed with my colleague. The student was unstable and had threatened to take their own lives multiple times. He started to believe he was in a relationship with this other teacher and it was the only reason to live. He'd corner the teacher a lot, trying to get them to be alone. He told other students they were in a relationship. He even sat outside the teacher's apartment after following him home once. When I heard and saw how his crush was escalating, I talked to the teacher and reported my concerns to admin. The other teacher was afraid he would lose his job because we're in the South and he's gay, and so he didn't know how to handle the situation, but was very uncomfortable. He was right. The student totally flipped out when admin and guidance confronted him. He assured them it was a real relationship and started trying to corner other staff to find out who told. He was escorted off campus by police multiple times. The teacher was put on leave and just quit and moved to another state, after which someone told the student I'd been the one to report to admin. He started following me around to try to figure out where the teacher moved, interrupted my classes over and over even though I didn't teach him, wanted to know what the teacher's new address was, and threatening me. I had to be escorted to my car at the end of the day several times. We were all afraid of the student. He once stood outside the school for hours in front of the flagpole crying. I was sure the kid was going to hurt himself or someone else. I begged everyone to get the kid help. His mom didn't believe any of it was true and refused all help that was offered, like counseling and a psych eval. She told the school that if they called her again making up stories about her son, she would sue. It was a mess. Next story. I was a teacher for 15 years. This happened to my girlfriend at her school. Grade 2 teacher hears sounds in the back coat closet. She finds a boy and a girl from her class, 6 to 7 years old, in the missionary position. When the boy hops off, he isn't hard. They were just pretending. Call both sets of parents in. Turns out they all get together on Saturday nights and have adult content nights. They watch adult content with the kids in the room. So these two kids were just mimicking what they saw. Child aid was called and my guess his adult night got canceled. Yeah, I hope that wasn't the only thing that was canceled. Maybe the parents' rights as guardians were canceled too, hopefully. Look, I'm pretty chill with raising your child how you want. But there are some hard and fast rules. And these aren't just social norms or whatever. These are backed up by science. Don't do these, you're gonna screw up your child. And hey, this is one of them. Next story. Had a girl randomly start crying frantically, so badly she couldn't breathe properly. And this kept going for 30 minutes. Mother picked her up and she was still struggling to breathe and still crying a little bit, but man, that freaked me the hell out. Also, one kid whose parents believed everything she said, and she said crap to not have to go to school. First, she said she was bullied by the entire class. She wasn't. Class was genuinely worried about her, as she was homesick a lot. Then I was bullying her. I guess asking her to answer random questions, just like every other student, counts as bullying when I know she doesn't know, as she hasn't opened her book. Then I got a phone call from the kid's mom at 9:30 p.m. saying kid wasn't coming to school next day, as another kid threatened to stab her. This was also made up. Tried everything, but this kid just didn't want to go to school, and her mother believed everything the kid said. Genuinely believed everyone was out to get her. Sad, really. Edit. Since people are replying to this saying I bullied her and this and that, this is how it happened. I took over the class, and for the first month of me teaching the class, this girl was in school 1 day. That's right, 1 day. She was the biggest nuisance during lectures, as she would constantly talk and not listen. And my one rule was when I'm talking, you're quiet, and you would raise your hand if you want to say something. I'm not going to treat her any differently from the other students breaking the rules. I did, as I treated her softer than the other kids, but I was warned about her when I took over. Over 18 months I had the class, she was in school less than 20 days, and we had to get social services involved. I just made one example over an 18-month period. Every kid in class was always extra nice to her because they liked her and wanted her in class and school. I treated her nicer than other kids because I wanted her to like school and come to school, but she didn't want to, and her parents, being the way they were, allowed it. She ended up having to go to special school and redo 3 years because of all this. Don't know how that's going, and I worry about her still. But hey, don't take one example and call me a bully and say I don't deserve better pay or whatever, because this whole situation ruined teaching for me for 2 full years and changed my attitude towards being a teacher completely. I quit teaching less than 2 years later. And to clarify even more, the whole asking her a question was during lectures and she was disrupting the class. I would ask students questions all the time to make sure they were listening, and I knew she wasn't listening because she was busy talking to her friends and making them lose focus as well. I don't know how anyone got to the conclusion that OP bullied this child from their first part of their post, but I don't know, that's just Reddit, I guess. It's not like OP was just this little female dog never came to class. And no. All OP said was, well, she told her mom I was bullying her and so she doesn't come to school. Pretty crazy assumption to be yep, OP was bullying her. The kid was right. Sometimes kids just lie because they don't want to go to school. And OP gave no indication for me to believe otherwise. I'm not saying we can know for sure without being in the room, but I'm saying jumping straight to the conclusion that OP did bully is equally presumptuous. Next story. Not a teacher, but a student. Me and a group of my friends were playing a game of duos tennis, and then the kid on my side moved into the way of the racket and got struck in the face with it. It was one of those metal ones, so it would have caused a bit of pain. After the incident, the school banned metal tennis rackets. The kid went to hospital for a week and is blind in his left eye. If he's seeing this, sorry. I wanted to make a joke about the kid, quote, seeing this and being half blind so bad, but then I remembered, hey, that's a child who just got half blinded, so I'm gonna lay off a bit. Next story. I used to be a school social worker and I am male. One time I did an intervention with a couple of middle schoolers, probably my second year on the job. So I was 26. It was conflict resolution and I was facilitating it with one of the counselors. This young lady, the conversation didn't go the way she wanted it to, but it ended up coming to a nice resolution between the two students. I guess she told her parents or someone that I had inappropriately touched her. Thank God my facilitator as well as the other students said I never made contact with her or anyone while we were doing the intervention. It got sorted out so quickly that I wasn't put on leave or anything. I believe the student admitted to making it up a bit later as well. Haven't had anything else like that happen in my 8 years working. That one will always stick out to me. I remember a brief moment of absolute horror. Next story. My mother was a teacher. She taught a kid whose dad was well known in the mafia. One day he came to her and told her that he found a dead body behind his home. We made sure our doors were locked at home and kept vigilant for a year after that. Next story. Not a teacher, former classmates, but almost 30 years later in a different state and with no ties left to that school. I still remember this as if it just happened. First grade. I was 7 years old. There was this really nice kid named Steven that I should have been nicer to in my own right. He was sweet, funny. He looked a little different, more pale than anyone else, but still a great kid. Then there was Dustin, who showed up later into the year. Dustin had something going on because he started off being polite, then a switch flipped and he was a mean prick, and for some reason started targeting Steven. So one day we're all having reading time, it's quiet and chill, the switch flips. Dustin gets up, pulls Steven on the floor, sits on his stomach, and wraps his hands around Steven's throat. There was no provocation, no trigger or anything. It was just raw hate. And that look in Dustin's eyes haunts me. The look on Steven's face as he's gasping to breathe makes my lungs tighten. I left that school and state the following school year, and I really hope both of them are doing all right. Next story. Kid was sitting behind a girl, and he used a lighter to set her hair on fire. It was put out quickly, thankfully, and never saw that boy again. I also saw this tiny kid who thought he was a gangster stab one of my other students with a pencil. The stabbed student was easily 300 pounds or more and was in a boxing program. He turned around, punched the stabber in the face so hard that 2 teeth fell out. Next story. Not a teacher, but friend's wife had a replica gun pointed to her head. It looked like a real revolver complete with replica bullet casings which you put the pellets into. She was threatened with some pretty horrible stuff by a 15-year-old. Since it wasn't a real gun, the kid faced no repercussions. The school decided it wasn't a police matter, and the woman was so traumatized she quit teaching, which she had done for 15 years. Also, when I was a student, a kid brought a shotgun to school, and he turned himself in and got 6 years. Next story. I'm not a teacher, but I guess something I did as a kid kid counts up as something scary. So if you're Asian, you'll be familiar with having tutors who would come to your house to teach you. My parents generally didn't have time, so they gave me tutors from a very young age. This one guy used to tutor me back in 3rd grade, and, well, I hated tutors. One day he was trying to make me do my homework, and I was throwing a fit. He threatened to complain about it to my mom. I straight up pointed my finger to him and said, "If you said that to my mom, the next day you'll be smacked without your underwears." From the next day, he brought me chocolates to make me study. I was a horrible kid. If you're out there, sir, I am so sorry. My parents later on gave up on assigning tutors because I would generally throw a fit or not study at all. I don't know why, but saying that if you're Asian, you'll be familiar with having tutors is so funny to me, as if tutors are unheard of outside of Asian families. A very strange, specification to make. I don't know the right word to say, but it's weird, right? It's weird. Next story. I'm not a teacher, but there was a student in my class that would randomly faint during class. One day he decided to randomly attack a teacher with a hockey stick, and a friend of mine had to take him by the leg so he would stop following him. That was probably scary for the teacher. He also started hitting his head against a pole on a trip. Pretty weird guy, but outside all of this, he was nice. Next story. I was a TA. A young boy grabbed another student and tried to throw him over the side of the building, a multi-story school with outside entrances. One of the teachers grabbed him and pulled him back. He got reprimanded for grabbing a student. The teacher got in trouble for saving a kid's life. I work in a different industry now. Next story. I'm a student, and the new kid forgot to tell everyone he was double jointed. His fingers were all pointing the wrong way seconds after he got his hand hit by a soccer ball. We were all scared crapless, and then he popped them back into place like nothing. Next story. I've seen some scary stuff, but I'm mostly scared by the collective numbness I've seen over the past few years. I teach woodshop and construction. There are always 1 to 3 apathetic students in a class, but not the whole class. No energy, no excitement, no passion, no simple motivation to get up and try things. Their cell phones and the pandemic have absolutely destroyed their motivation to take a step or make a mess and create. There is no room for any sort of gratification that isn't immediate. I'm more of an untrained and unequipped therapist than I am a teacher. Next story. Not a teacher, but worked in a school. During lunch, a 2nd grade student grabbed the kid next to him, put him in a headlock, and started shoving fries into his mouth until the kid started choking. One of the aides rushed over and pulled him off the kid and administered the Heimlich. When asked why, he just shrugged and said, "I wanted to see what dying looked like." He was a constant problem child. He was also charming as hell and could talk himself out of being in trouble. Next story. Had a Jewish student who worshipped Hitler. He would draw on a Hitler mustache at school with a Sharpie. Once, on a dress casual day, he wore a replica of full German war uniform that he bought online. He also carried a portable speaker and played Nazi music during lunch breaks. He was eventually suspended and given therapy. He was 12. I want to just chalk this one up to, kids doing the counterintuitive thing, trying to be cool in some way. It's like, yeah, I'm Jewish, but Hitler was pretty cool. That kind of vibe. It's like when the concept of irony first gets solidified in their mind, so they think that's the peak of human existence, to defy expectations or whatever. Anyway, drawing on the mustache with a Sharpie is bold, dude. Surely the bit wasn't worth all that. Next story. I'm not a teacher, but when I was in middle school in the 80s, around 10 years old, one of my friends whispered to me that he wanted to show me something during the break. I went to his desk during the break and he opened his backpack, looked around to see if there were any other students or teachers around, and then pulled out a hand grenade. Next story. I am not a teacher. However, while attending junior high, I was in a class with a student who wasn't very well liked. He was picked on so badly, and I felt sad for him. I started talking to him quite often. One day we were at lunch and he asked me to come into the hall with him. He had something to show me. We went out into the hall and he brought a knife to school. He said because I was so nice to him, he was going to cut me up and eat me. Dead face. Not joking. I started backing away from him and turned around to run to the office. Once there, I was shaking so hard and crying nobody understood me. I was finally able to tell them what happened, but he was nowhere on campus. They never found him, and for years I never went out alone. He scared me bad. I remember his name to this day and still try to Google him to see if I can find his name out there. This happened around 78 or 79. I hope he got the help he needed. Next story. Obligatory, I'm not a teacher. In first and second grade, one of the smallest kids in my class was one of the loudest and most aggressive/bad kids in our grade. I'll call him Ben. One time in second grade, I had a hall pass, and I remember passing by the front office and hearing Ben in the principal's office behind closed doors having a full-volume shouting match with the principal, and hearing him getting paddled. It was awful. I couldn't understand why he was like that. Then Ben moved away for several years. Fast forward to 6th grade Spanish class in middle school. Suddenly, Ben was back, but he was almost 6 feet tall and was very mild-mannered. We got along fine as we were both outcasts, and I was glad to see he was so well-adjusted from when I last saw him years ago. There was now another kid who was very skinny but was one of the loudest kids in our grade. I'll call him TJ. He was a goof and very obnoxious, but otherwise usually harmless. A few weeks into the new school year, just before Spanish class had started, TJ walks past Ben and I, and he says to Ben, "I heard you and your dad used to get it on." A switch suddenly flipped in Ben. He stood up from his desk. He simultaneously took his glasses off and slammed them onto his desk. Ben then proceeded to grab TJ and lift him with 2 hands completely over his head and throw TJ across the center of the room and into the desks. I don't remember much of what happened after that, as the classroom erupted into chaos. I don't think there was much of a fight. TJ was scrappy but frail in comparison to Ben. I think Ben may have managed to get a few punches in with TJ still stunned on the ground before it was all over. Ben and TJ went to the office, of course, once peace was restored. However, I never saw Ben again after that. Unfortunately, TJ returned after some period of time. I think he may have been suspended for his part in the incident. Ultimately, I guess I found out what had been going on with Ben all those years ago. It made me pretty sad. My heart went out to him for all the horrible things he must have endured. Next story. So I'm not a teacher, but I feel like this fits here. I had a boyfriend who had a 7-year-old son when we got together. About a year later, I found out I was pregnant. When I was 4 months along, we told his family, including his son. I could tell he wasn't thrilled, which I understand. New woman in dad's life, and now he wasn't going to be the only child anymore. But then he took it too far. Started threatening to kick me and push me down the elevator shaft. Once we were walking through Walmart and I said, "Oh, look at how cute this little coat is." Infant coat. He said to me, "Why don't I put you in a meat grinder so you can fit in it?" Last straw for me was after going for my first ultrasound, they thought they saw a black mass in the baby's stomach. It was scary. When we were talking about it, his son said, "Good, I hope something bad happens to it." Baby was fine, but his father and I aren't together anymore. What is with these kids and hating unborn babies? This isn't the first one in this thread. What's going on, dude? Next story. As a high school English teacher, I've seen my fair share of strange and concerning behaviors from students. But the scariest thing I ever witnessed was from a quiet and reserved student named Emily. One day, while grading papers during my free period, I noticed that Emily had submitted a short story for extra credit. It was well written and engaging, but as I read further, I began to feel uneasy. The story detailed the murder of several classmates in graphic and disturbing detail. I immediately brought the story to the attention of the school's guidance counselor and principal, and they arranged for Emily to have a psych eval. It turns out she had been struggling with some deep-seated personal issues and had been using her writing as a way to cope with her feelings. It was a sobering reminder of the importance of being aware of the signs of mental distress in our students and making sure they have access to the resources and support they need. Next story. Late to the party, but we had a creepy 4-year-old a few years ago. One day he was the last kid to get picked up and his parents were late, so it was him, me, and another teacher alone in the school lobby looking out the windows.
"Miss OP, are you gonna let that lady in? She looks cold."
There's no lady outside, buddy."
"Yeah, there is. She's on the porch."
Pauses. Eyes track from window to door to inside lobby.
"It's okay. She's inside now."
Still squicks me out. That kid was sweet, but so creepy. He used to talk about seeing a lady outside in the road a lot, and another lady on the ceiling in his classroom. Next story. Former teacher here. In my 8 years of teaching, I saw an 8th grader assaulting a 5th grader under a stairwell out of camera view. This wasn't his first time, just the first time he was caught. The poor girl was an immigrant with poor English-speaking skills and non-involved parents. I also saw the amount of blood from 2 girls fighting in the bathroom using a broken mirror as blades, and a student intentionally tripped a teacher down a set of stairs. Next story. Not a teacher at the time. I was the student in this story. Really, all just a big misunderstanding. I was in middle school in the early 2000s. This was after 9/11, but long before school shootings were as commonplace. Like most middle school boys, I was obsessed with blowing stuff up, as well as tinkering and cool new weapons, etc. My friends and I would build potato cannons and flamethrowers, all sorts of stuff outside of school. I even built a 6-foot catapult that won my group at the science fair. Fast forward one random day, midway through 7th grade. I'm in the caf with friends having lunch. A teacher runs into the caf, visibly out of breath, whispers to another teacher who darts directly over to me, tells me I need to report to the principal's office immediately. I comply, wondering what I could have done this time. As I'm walking down, I try to gather some intel. I stop a friend in the hall and soon learn that there's rumors floating around that I brought a gun to school. The truth of the matter is, I did not have a gun in my locker that day. I had, however, purchased a few BB guns from a friend several months before this. We exchanged the BB guns and cash discreetly at school, and the toy guns never found their way back to the building. I later found out a classmate overheard our conversation and the details were lost in translation. Coincidentally, by a sheer stroke of luck, on this exact day, another friend had been returning from a vacation in the Carolinas. I told him that if he could get his hands on some M80s or any other serious explosives, to bring back as much as he could, and I paid him in advance. Unbeknownst to me, my friend had brought 12 kilograms of fireworks to school that day, and kindly stored them for me in my locker. I was frequently buying and selling things at school, so my friends and I all knew each other's locker combinations. So when security, being tipped off about a weapon, went to search my locker, they instead found it stuffed to the brim with explosives. Police were involved. It was a mess. I will say this story ends on a happy note because I was ultimately expelled from school, and with nothing to do all day, my mom bought me a basketball. I began playing daily and fell in love with the sport, going on to play in college and coach for several years. Next story. Not a teacher, but in high school, a new kid came into class one day. He didn't say a word for the first week, refusing to answer the teacher even. Week 2, Monday, he abruptly stands up, pulls out a can of lighter fluid, pours it all over his desk, lights it, and walks out of the room. Never saw him again. Found out I was dating his younger sister later on and promptly and politely ended things out of fear I would end up like the aforementioned desk. Next story. Didn't happen to me, but to a colleague. We were teaching undergrad at the time while working on our postgrad degree at the same university, so I knew him as my classmate from the same program, though we taught different disciplines. One day during the last week of the semester, he told me one of his students had gone to his office and asked him to revise his final grade, since the kid had failed the course due to many missed assignments and routinely skipping class. When he naturally refused to pass him, the kid very calmly told him that if he didn't pass him, he'd run the risk of having something pretty unfortunate happen to him because the kid's family was connected. The thing is, the kid's last name was the same as a very well-known drug lord / mobster, and the kid obviously had plenty of money to burn, and that was partly why he failed the class, since he was always partying and so on. My friend told me he was struggling with deciding what to do, because on one hand, he didn't want to pass him and suspected he might be bullcrapping him. On the other, it was entirely feasible it was true, and he didn't want to get sent to the hospital or worse because he failed a mobster's son. Sometime later, he told me he'd opted to give the kid the lowest passing grade possible because he didn't want to risk it, and he felt like he couldn't realistically do anything about it. Look, this is one of those situations where I'm of the opinion that you only have one life. Are you going to chance it for something like that? I don't think I would. I would probably do exactly what the teacher did here. Is it ethical when it comes to being a teacher? No, not at all. A bad idea, even. But staying alive sounds pretty good to me, so I'm going to go with that one. Anyway, that's the last story for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I will see you in the next one.